questions, but if we don't get to you right away, that's just because we're on a roll. We're on a roll. You guys know how it is. Y'all know how it is. And with that, yeah, I'll kick it off. Let's do a little round robin here. Hi, for those who don't know me, I'm the community manager here over in Fortnite Creative and UFN. My name is Shane Callie.
Dan, we're not
And
hearing sound on the stream.
there's no sound. Can you hear me?
Okay, great.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Dan. Hello, hello. We'll do that again. Whoop. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're going to be talking all about verse persistence in our dev deep dive stream, all about it. As you know, with these streams, we kind of just dive right in. We're going to get right to the meat of it and talk all about it. We've got an amazing team here who's worked on it to talk all about the verse Speedway template and everything that they added to that template to make it super useful for all of you here in the community. So we'll be going over how it was made, a lot about the verse, which I know y'all are very excited for, and we'll be taking questions throughout the conversation. So if you do have a question, make sure and put it in brackets question before you write out your question so we can see it easier, because I know y'all are going to have a lot of great ones. We'll be breaking periodically for that, but for the most part, if we're on a roll, we'll be on a roll, but don't think we haven't seen your question. We'll do our best to get to it today. And with that, we'll do a little bit of a round robin. For those who don't know me, hi, I'm Shane Callie. I'm the community manager over here on Fortnite Creative and UEFN. Yeah, I'll popcorn it over to Heather Storm.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Storm. See lots of friends in the chat, so glad you're here. I am the manager of creator evangelism. It's my team's job to make sure all of you have all the tools you need to be successful with UEFN. So really excited to dive into this template that I made with all of my lovely friends here. So I'll popcorn it over to Evan.
Hey everyone, I'm Evan Brown. I'm a programmer writer on the Fortnite ecosystem team. I'll be talking a lot about the verse side of things and cool design decisions we made in the template. Yeah, I'll popcorn it over to Dave.
Hi, my name is Dave Haslam. I'm a lead gameplay programmer working on Fortnite ecosystem team and one of the developers that helped work on verse persistence. So happy to be here today to help answer those questions. And with that, I'll pass it over to Andy.
Right. So I worked some on persistence as well, mostly the compiler side of it. Oh yeah, Andy, principal language engineer, and so aside from persistence, a bunch of other random stuff for the verse compiler. So that's kind of it. I guess who's taking over for me? Shane, maybe?
Yes, thanks, Andy. Thanks, team. All right. And with that, we're going to dive in. Let's give a brief overview, I guess, of like how this came to be. Heather, I'll throw it to you. Just kind of, we had the template to begin with. We added a bunch of stuff in. There's a great blog about it, and I'll pop that in chat now, about how all of this kind of was put together and what the idea was. But Heather, take it away. Let us know a little bit about the backstory.
Yeah. Okay. So if you'll rewind with me for a minute to the times before UEFN, right when I was starting out here, I was learning the creative tool set with my team, and we had just released the new racetrack artistic elements. And so we were testing them out on our side to make sure that they were working well and that they provided like a good gameplay experience for races. This was before Rocket Racing was a thing, before UEFN. And so we jumped into creative, made this cute little map, and then sent it over to the docs team. And we're like, hey, could this maybe be a tutorial about how to create a really cool race? We had some really specific mechanics that we built in around popping players back into their car whenever they despawned or exited the car, and a couple of other things that we were really proud of as like technical things that were hard to do in creative, but we had found ways to do it. So we worked really hard on that, and then we released it and promptly forgot about it until March of this year when Evan and Sarah and some other people on the docs team came to us and they were like, hey, your racetrack is super cool. Wouldn't it be fun if we upgraded it to UEFN and then added in verse persistence so that we could have a really awesome map that shows you how to actually use local leaderboards and other verse mechanics that just didn't have any template about them yet. So we said yes and started working on the revamp for all of the things for this map. So, Evan, actually, if we want to go to your screen share real quick, I kind of want to just show briefly. This is the original look and feel for the Speedway map. It was a figure-8 map using those racetrack pieces. You can see we used a ton of devices, especially to keep people in the racetrack. And so we made a bunch of new design decisions. Do we want to go look at the new map now, Evan?
Yeah, here we go.
All
This
right.
is the
Ooh.
updated, much cleaner one.
Much cleaner, more interesting visually, lots more going on here. So we'll first have Evan kind of take over and dive into the verse stuff, but after we get through all the verse, we'll come back to talking about the design decisions that we made here, going from that figure-8 to this much more different looking environment here. But yeah, Evan, let's pass it off to you and talk about verse.
Yeah, for sure. So, as Heather said earlier this year, Sarah Rust and I, Sarah Rust being the senior programmer writer manager on our team, approached Heather and Josh Grant, also on that team, about, hey, verse persistence is this new feature that's going to be coming soon. It's really cool. Is there anything that we can do to update an existing template into UEFN and then bring in this new verse persistence feature? And the reason we specifically targeted Speedway is because when learning about persistence at K, we can make data variables persistable across game sessions. That's cool. I see him getting friend requests. I probably should have turned off friend requests on Epic. Anyway, so given that we have the ability to make data persistable now, what is it that creators want to do with that? What is something that would immediately jump to mind? And what jumped out to me was leaderboards. Leaderboards are a pretty game agnostic thing. They work across multiple different game modes, and racing games are probably the most obvious thing that you would see leaderboards in. Both for lifetime stats of players, and then also leaderboards within a race, and in pregame lobbies and at the end of a race. So we took the existing Speedway template, and we'll go into it in the design section later. But we also collaborated with Heavy Iron Studios to design a whole new racetrack, which looks beautiful. And then we started to look at, okay, with persistence and with what we've got, what can we do to integrate that into the existing template? So we started from this idea of leaderboards. So as a quick intro to persistible data, like I said, is data that persists across game sessions. So when you update a persistible stat, that data is saved for that player, and when that player loads back in to a game that's been ongoing or repeated game sessions across sessions, that data variable will persist. You can define persistible data in two ways and reuse both this template. You use a weak map variable, which is something that maps players to a particular type. That type could be anything from a class to an int to a struct to an enum, all these sorts of different things. And you also can map persistible data using a weak map session variable. But we'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to focus on just the weak map of players to a particular type. So to define our persistible data, we want to do a leaderboard, right? I really need to show our friend request. And so we said, okay, what things would players want to track in a Speedway race, right? So we settled on 3 different stats. The number of lifetime points a player has earned, which the higher a player's placement during a race, the more points they earn. The number of podiums for a player. This isn't one-to-one with wins, but it's basically if you got 3rd, 2nd, or 1st, you get a podium. I'm sure in other racing games you've played, at the end of a Grand Prix or some other thing, they show off all the different players and their placements in that Grand Prix, and this is what that's tracking. And then the best lap time. We settled on these as the big 3 stats for each player. So we defined a custom class, this player stats table class. To define a persistable class, you have to add the final specifier, which says that you can't subclass from this class. You can't override any methods from it either. And you also add the persistable modifier, which means that all these data values will be persistable. You can only add persistable types, and they can't be variables. And so hearing that, you might think, okay, well then, if you define these persistable data points, how do you actually update them? So how you can do that is with a constructor function. So if we scroll down here, we'll get to all the rest of the functions later. But putting your data into a persistable class and managing it in the form of tables makes it really easy to both track data and to update it, because it also allows you to do partial updates using constructors. So when you want to build a stats table for a player, you can pass it all the old, you can do it building off the old version of the class, passing in all the old variables, and doing it this way also allows you to do partial updates on. So for instance, if I want to update just the number of points a player has, I could pass in an old stats table and then just the points variable and update it that way. But you can see down here, this is our player stats map. This is what I was talking about with the weak map. This is how you define a persistable piece of data. It maps players to their individual player stats tables. So across game sessions, these will persist. To manage persistable data as well, even though you can define persistable data, sometimes it's better to organize your code in a way where you can easily do updates, manage, modify, and retrieve that data using a manager class. So that's what we also added here. And as a callout, you can see a full tutorial for how this was implemented in the make your own leaderboard with verse tutorial. I'll paste that for Shane to post to chat.
Thank you.
And also you can see all the design decisions that went into this with the design or custom round logic doc and designing a Speedway Race doc as well. So
Yeah, so this template that you just shared is slightly different. It's a more pared down
yes,
leaderboard specific, and then you can also navigate to the greater page to read more about all of Speedway. But that initial doc is probably where you're going to want to start, because it talks you through like the why behind all of this.
yeah. And if you'd like to try out Speedway yourself, that's something you can very easily create by going to the Projects tab, Island Templates, and not this one, so sorry. In feature examples, you can create your own Speedway Race with verse persistence if you'd like to jump in and try it out yourself immediately. All right, back to VS Code. So, persistable data, right? Like I said, it's a lot easier to manage persistable data if you have a manager class that you can quickly call methods of and instantiate. So you have things like retrieving a player's stats. It just reaches into that global weak map variable, pulls out a player stats table and retrieves it. You can initialize individual stats and stats tables per player. And then we have different functions here for things like recording a player's best lap time, adding points per player, adding wins, setting their lap time, that sort of thing. There's a lot of custom logic here for things like if the lap time is negative, if it's actually better or worse, adding points, but I won't get too far into the weeds of that. So, like I said, there's two types of persistable data we use in here, both the player to type weak map variable, which persists across game sessions, and then the session weak map of session to type variable that persists just within a session. I'll continue talking about just the player to type here. And the order of which to talk about this is going to be a little weird, but bear with me. So I'm actually going to talk about what happens at the end of the race first. Because when you have persistable data, there's also a question of when do you want to update it? And for us, that happens at the end of a race. Once everyone finishes, we can figure out who won, how many points to award them, what their best lap time is, that sort of thing. So all that happens here in this race manager class, race end manager. There's lots of things here like placement required for win, the number of points player gets, lots and lots of device references. But I'm going to make a few calls here for some things. So when the game starts, we make stats tables for each players, right? We wait for the race to begin, and then we wait for the race to end. And I'm going to make a call out here to something specific. This array sync function is pretty interesting. So to know when a player finishes the race, right, we have to record all their stats in the player stats table, that sort of thing. And instead of looping through each player and like figuring out who finished and doing that all right at the end, instead we can use this neat function that we have on the EDC snippet repository called array sync. And what array sync does is it takes an array of a type and a function that takes that type, a asynchronous function to be specific, and it calls that asynchronous function on each element of the array. Now you might think, okay, why would you do this? The reason is with array sync, we can sync up, using the sync expression, all of those asynchronous functions on all of those elements of the array to make sure they all end at the same time. And the reason this is important is because we want to make sure every player finishes the race and then run all logic on them, right? And by waiting for each player to finish the race by using array sync, because array sync won't exit until the function we passed it, which I'll get to in a moment, until all of those finish, we can make sure we sync up our logic so that certain things happen only after all players have finished the race. There's a lot to dig into there. Like I said, this is a function on the EDC snippet repository that's super duper useful. It also comes with this array race function, which is the same thing, but for the race expression. And I will post a link to that in a moment after I'm done explaining. So when the race ends, right, the thing we're passing to array sync to update our persistable data at the end of the race is this wait for player to finish race function, right? So when a player finishes the race, we just want to record a finish, which is based on their current stats. And we also want to make sure that, like, if they leave the race halfway, we don't do it. That's the other value of array sync, in that if a player leaves the game lobby, this function will break, and that break will continue to array sync, so we'll stop waiting on that particular player. Previously, we had an issue where if one player left the race the round end logic would technically never happen because it'd be waiting for a player that didn't happen. But by using array sync, we can get around that. So recording a player finish, this is where we do our updates for persistable data. So we also have this little thing here that when a player finishes, we start a little timer just to make sure that no one can basically hold the race hostage. And then once that race end timer runs out, the game actually finishes. I think players have a minute to finish after the first player finishes. So for updating data, we just check if their placement was better than the one required to win. We call that add win function I showed off earlier in the player stats manager, which just retrieves their current player stats table. And then, like I said with the constructor function, it takes the current player stats table, makes a new player stats table by passing the old one, but the only stat it updates is this podium stat, which correlates with their wins. That way we're doing a partial update of the persistable data rather than having to rewrite the whole thing.
Okay,
and then
Evan,
go
before
on.
you continue, when you clicked add win, what did you do to make it automatically go to the player stats manager?
I got you. So if you highlight over any function, right, and it also works with variables, you can hit this go to definition button. Hotkey is also F12. And so that will take you to the file where this is defined, which is super useful.
Yeah, super useful. I was like, oh, that was a fun thing. Okay, now you can go back to the race end manager after add win.
Yes. So same deal happens for points and best lap time. We update our persistable data at the end of a race when a player finishes. And the reason I'm talking about this starting from the end of the race is because, like I said, there's two types of weak map variables. The ones that map players to persistable data, which persists across sessions, which you can use for your experiences like, oh, these are these players' lifetime stats, right? But there is a second type of weak map variable, and we want to show off both in this tutorial to show when each one might be appropriate. The second type is the one that maps a session to a particular type. Now, session data is only local to the session, obviously, and it's also cleared every single time the round carries over. So after each race, even though the match has multiple rounds, this data will be cleared. So I will go to the definition for that. This race order thing, right? The idea behind race order and why we want to use a weak map that maps session info to a particular type is because what should happen when a player starts the race, right? Or rather, where should they start the race? And I'm going to go to the starting line here. If you've played a lot of other racing games, usually the player who finished first in the previous race is the person who starts first at the starting line. And second player starts second, third, so on and so forth, right? And we want to replicate that. But currently, there wasn't really a way to know what round we were on, right? That wasn't in the native device functions. So that's something we had to implement ourselves.
Now, on the first spawn
Yes.
in for a round, it is still random.
Correct.
Right?
So on the very first spawn of a match, on round like 0 or 1, basically, it's just shuffled. It's just shuffled by players. You could implement it so that it uses a player's lifetime stats, so that like the player with the best lifetime stats is always the person starting first. But we just wanted to keep it random, just so there was a little more like variance in
Well, we
between the
also
race.
didn't want to overemphasize somebody who
That
maybe
too.
played the map a lot and like not give anyone else an opportunity to get first sometimes.
Yeah. So all this happens in this race order file, right? And here we're actually using both types of persistable data. We're using the circuit info weak map, which maps players to their circuit info, which I'll get to in a moment. And then also this weak map that maps the current session to the session round info. Of note, currently there's a limitation where you can only have 2 player weak maps in your experiences. So we're using the first one for player circuit info, and we're using the second one for players' lifetime stats. As far as I'm aware, you can have any amount of weak map of session to info, but currently only 2 player to type maps for persistable data. So why do we have 2 maps? Why 1 round and why 1 session? Sorry, why one really persistable and why 1 session? So like I said before, we can't know what round it is, so we actually need to track that info in a map that persists across rounds, which is a use case for persistable data. But the round info, this session map, can help us track where a player finishes in the current round, and which is what you see here. You see in the round info class, a player's start position, which just maps a player to their starting position, and then the current round number. And then for the circuit info, which is that persistable and that persists across game sessions, we have the order in which players finished the last round, and also the last completed round number. And the reason we're tracking round numbers per player is because, okay, so say you're on round number 2 of a game, right? What happens if a player joins? If you try and look at that player to figure out what round number it is, you're going to get this -1. And, oh no, your code doesn't actually know what's up, right? So we have a function here which finds the highest completed round among all players. And once the entire match is finished, and also once a player rejoins the game, their round info gets completely cleared. So this just persists across the match. So this is a way to use persistable data across a match, but not across a player's total lifetime playing your experience, right? The leaderboards are for your players playing across your game multiple times, but this is a way to use persistable data. Even though it's persistent, it's only within the context of that match. And then we just have a lot of functions here for like recording a player's finish number, updating the current round, resetting their circuit info, whether it's the first round, all these things, and a lot of comparison functions. That's the thing I should actually call out as well. If we go back to player stats table real quick, the way you can compare different player stats to figure out where to order them is by using these comparison functions that just take both of your types and it's checking a particular stat and then returning it. You'll see this later when we talk about sorting algorithms. All right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like the nice thing about this comparison function and the sorting algorithms when we get to them is that this is like super usable. You can put it in verse for almost anything else that you're doing. It's not just relevant to leaderboards. So
Oh, yeah. All right. So the reason I started with the end and am now moving back to the start of the round is because we used that persistable round data to do something that I think is pretty cool. So I'm actually going to start up a private island game with
gosh.
Heather.
Let me ready up.
We're not going to be racing. We're not going to be racing. We're just going to have this in the background.
Okay.
But the main reason we're doing this is for the intro cinematic, which I'm going to show you.
All right.
So another thing you see with racing games, right? Players are lined up according to how they finished the last round. And then sometimes it does like a little cinematic where it goes through each player. And we wanted to do that too. We wanted to go through each player and show off their stats. But, oh no, wait, how do we know which players, which stats if they start in a random order? And then also like what their particular round is, all these sorts of considerations. So we had to do a lot. And I'll show you here. I'll go ahead and start the game. There'll be a 30-second countdown because on the very first round of a game of Speedway, we do this countdown in the pregame lobby.
And this is an opportunity to actually look at the leaderboard.
Yes.
Which is great. You can see that I haven't played this map at all yet.
Yeah, this is an example of that persistible data. So you see for me on Microcosmoids here, I have 10 total points, one time on the podium, 61-second best lap time, whereas Heather has no stats. I had played this before this live stream just to like get some data in there. Just so I'd actually have something to show you. But we'll come back and talk about the design of this lobby area first. So this intro cinematic, I'm going to play it and then kind of explain what's happening. So we go over, there's 2 players in this experience, right? I'm player 1. It shows off my points on the side. It pans to Heather, and then it ends the cinematic.
Are we leaving?
Not yet. So
Okay.
if Heather then finishes this race ahead of me, Heather will be the one who appears in first for that cinematic.
Do we want to do that?
Yeah, why not?
All
Yeah,
right.
let's do it.
We can do it on the side. While
Yeah. While you keep talking, I'll just race and beat you.
Yeah, just beat me, please.
I will win this time because Evan's not actually playing.
Okay, so I want to talk about this specifically because I think we found a really cool solution to a really interesting problem. So when the game starts, right, we do the pregame lobby, we wait for everything. We have a function that assigns players to vehicles based on their starting positions. If your number of starting positions are determined by that round info session week map that I showed off earlier. So once we have that, at the start of a match, it's random, but within a match, it's just based on how you did in the last round. We assign players to their vehicles. We're just lining up 2 arrays. And then we play the cinematic lineup. So this cinematic lineup is, and I'll get into this giant block of code here. I'll help detangle this for everyone. Our question was, how do we end the cinematic lineup early? Because if we have 8 players total in a match, but we only have 2 players actually playing, how do we end the cinematic ahead of time? So, and you can see this yourself if you play Speedway. We're using a trigger here, and we're using the erasing function I talked about before. We're passing every player and then this wait for player intro function. We're using triggers to count up to where that particular player's like starting order is by running this code block. And then once that code block lines up, once the number of triggers lines up with that player's starting order, then we break. So that's why we're looping, syncing, and blocking for all these things, because we're doing this per player. And then we're also racing because we need to make sure that if a player leaves, like it doesn't break everything. So I know that's not completely persistence related, but I really want to talk about because I thought we found a pretty interesting solution to a kind of weird problem. Um,
Okay, I'm about to finish lap 2 now. So do you want me to do
yes,
that so that we can go back and watch the cinematic?
yes, we can watch Heather leave me in the dust.
Well, you got 90 seconds to get 2 laps in, Evan. Do you
Oh
think you can
God.
do it?
Okay. You know what? I'll find something else to talk about in the meantime.
All right. Sorry, I didn't
Um,
know it was going to take that long.
no, you're totally good. But actually, this is good. So when that race started, you guys saw, or sorry, when we loaded in the pregame lobby, you guys saw that lineup of Heather and I, and our player reference devices and our billboards, because you want a way to show off your players, basically, right? Player reference devices are a good way to do that. You know, you get to see their player with their skin. You can pick a custom pose, highlight them, do all these things, show off their stats, and we want a way to do that in our experience. But to order them was a different problem. And this is again where the EDC snippet repository comes in. I'm going to shout that out. For that, we use some sorting algorithms. Sorting algorithms do exactly what they say. They sort a particular array of elements, and we have 2 sorting algorithms in this project for you. We're using merge sort mainly, which is like a recursive divide and conquer sort, which puts things in order based on the comparison function you give it. But we also have quick sort and then recently heap sort on the snippet repository if you want to go take a look at that. So when like we load into the lobby, there's all these different stats billboards. And I can actually jump here into UEFN because I realize that when this race ends,
Okay,
for Heather and
race
I,
has ended.
yes. All right, I'll jump between a few things. I'll keep my screen on here. If I show this off. So next one's going to start in a few seconds. Heather's data is now in the map. Heather now has that persistible data, which will show up on the pop-up UI when it pans to her during the cinematic. And Heather will also start ahead of me because Heather finished first in the current round. We're going to be in the lobby. We skip to here. We start playing the cinematic. Boom, Heather's in first.
Woo!
Because her persistible data put her here. And then her weak map data, and there you can see her stats were there on the right on the thing. And that's pulling directly from that weak map. So actually, we're going to leave.
Got it.
We're going to go back to lobby. Because the real value of persistible data is that it persists between sessions, right? So right now I have this private island code that we're both playing off. And I'm going to hit ready up and we're going to jump right back in. And when we do, both of our stats will have persisted because the private island code is still out there. And when we do, you can see we have this lineup in the lobby of player reference devices. When the game starts, these are going to be sorted by the number of lifetime points a player has. And that's done in this player leaderboards function for updating stats, billboards, pop-up UI, all these things, player reference devices. And all it's doing is calling that merge sort function, which we've provided for you guys, and it's on the EDC, passing in a comparison function, which were all the different ones we defined in that leaderboards class. And then it just automatically sorts them. So if we go, we see here, I still have more points than Heather because I'm just amazing or something. Who knows?
You're that cool.
Yeah. So I appear first, but now Heather's stats appear here. We're in sorted order, and boom. There you go. That's persistible data. That's how we use it in this experience.
I just want to shout out in the chat. Josh is watching, and he said, "What a nice cinematic!" And I love that self congratulatory chat.
Yeah, thanks, Josh.
But Josh did do a really good job on this opening cinematic.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Sarah Rust. Obviously, Sarah implemented the verse logic for the cinematic, and my
and
God.
all of the like pop-ups here. She did great.
Yes, it's
you,
very
Sarah.
ingenious. Would not have been possible without Sarah. But yeah, that's kind of a brief overview of all the persistible things in this experience.
Cool.
So I will pass it off to anyone who wants to talk.
We got a lot of questions. Yeah, thank you, Heather, so much for pulling them. Let's see. Okay. What future additions would you like to see added to the racing point of view? tire performance, AI improving their racing skills, etc.
Racing point of view.
Interesting.
So we right now, like, this is the focus here is persistence. So we didn't really do a ton of other work on, how do we make sure that people are getting better at racing and things like that. When we get into the design of the map, there are a couple of things that we did that we'll talk about. But we'll wait until we get to that design section.
Cool. This question is for Evan. How long did it take to collect all those collectibles, Evan,
Oh
and
God.
build them?
Way too long. way too long. And also putting them in spots that you can actually like reach. You have no idea how many times we tested this map, y'all. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Are there any plans on making a tycoon game template? I don't know if we have much insight into that, but it was asked.
We have heard that request from the community before, so it's very much something. It's very much something that we thought about, and we do know that tycoon games are a very popular genre within the Fortnite ecosystem.
Yeah, good call. Will we ever have the ability to make leaderboards update across sessions, like the ability to use player names and data in different sessions that they're not in? That's a good question.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Thanks, Steve.
We are looking at a more generalized leaderboard solution. No official release date yet to announce, but this is something that we're investigating at this time.
Awesome. It's kind of similar. Will Persistent be able to hold global leaderboards, not only of the players currently in the experience, so we can have really high scores?
That's the same answer. So
Yeah.
that's the type of leaderboards we're looking at adding support for.
Cool.
That would allow you to have, like was said, in order for the data that's in the persistent data today to be present in the session, that player has to be in the session. And so that does only allow you to do a session local leaderboard with the people in the current session. We do want to enable more of these global type leaderboards in the future.
Cool. Thanks so much, Dave. Will there be any tools to access or modify persistent data outside of live sessions, say via content service to set an IS admin logic stat to true, or is admin logic stat to true?
This is something that we've talked about a lot. We currently are not actively working on any of these tools. It is something that we know that the community is interested in. So I wouldn't rule it out in the future. But for now, this is not an area that we're actively pursuing.
And then Heather, I know there was a question you wanted us to answer live. It was our thread is evolved. There's a lot of great questions. There you go.
We did that. Nope, I think we got
We did it?
the one that I
Okay.
said. I
Great.
think there's also will the verse persistence system ever be usable with a device instead of verse scripting?
Question.
So I can answer that one, and maybe Andy can chime in with other context if he has it. The same underlying support that runs verse persistence is also used in UEFN projects to back the persistent devices that already exist. So we have the save point device, trigger device, like there's a handful of creative devices that you can use in UEFN experiences and in creative experiences to do persistence. Those are backed by the same system that is now backing verse persistence. But this also means, and why it might be important to know that for you as authors of experiences, is we maintain and make sure that those state of those objects and the persistent data are saved at the same time so that they maintain consistency between each other. So if you had some data saved in like a trigger device in that creative device in your world, it would be consistent with the state that you may have modified in your first persistent data as well.
Thank you. And then we also have, why don't camera mode devices work with vehicles?
I can speak to this a little bit. So currently we are still developing all of the cameras and controls devices. And so there are quite a few features that aren't always available. And right now with with a lot of things that we're working through. There's just some limitations there. So we're working through it. We know that this is a common complaint and we want to make sure that cameras are compatible with vehicles, but we're getting there. Let us cook.
Ooh. Yeah, let them cook. Let them cook, y'all. Does Verse include common algorithms like graphs in its libraries?
Yeah, so there's well, there aren't any graph algorithms. There are some like kind of basic array algorithms, searching, splitting arrays, making slices, that type of thing. Um, and let me triple check just to make sure. Um, Here, I want to verify one other thing that I'll add to that answer in just a second.
Thank you. Thank you. Feel free. Keep the questions coming, everyone. If you have a question, again, put a question in brackets at the start of it, just so we can separate them from all the others, because we got so many. And we'll only be answering questions that are on topic for what we're talking about today, just because those are the experts we have in the room. So we're going to do our best.
Okay, so there's a good question here from Boop. I see you laid out most of your code into separate folders and modules. Is this a good format? Evan, can you talk about the code review process that we went through and how we developed all this?
Ooh, good
Yes.
question.
So the code for this went through rather extensive code review. Organizing your code into modules, folders, splitting up responsibilities, dependencies is important both from an organizational and a programming standpoint. Typically, you want like your class's files to handle a particular thing, rather than having it all in one giant, like thousands and thousands of lines long file, because that's really hard to read. It's also really hard to like modify, and it's even harder for other people to come in and work on your code. So one of the main value adds is honestly pure organization. You will thank yourself later.
It's true.
But also, as part of the process of writing the code, we actually had a lot of the Verse team review each file and make sure that the best practices that we're putting in all of our documentation are really the best practices that we want you all to be following. So I just wanted to like shout out a huge thanks to the whole Verse team that spends their time doing our code reviews, but also to the docs team for just being super thorough and making sure that these examples are really what we think is like the best use of Verse today. And as the language continues to evolve, so too will our samples.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. I saw a question from Skylar. Hi, Skylar. About so I know I've seen this feedback a bit about people who have dyslexia struggle a little bit to learn code, and especially the ones that are learning Verse coming to me about that. I've heard that a few times. And they're wondering if we have any advice for anyone who has dyslexia and is trying to learn a new coding language or Verse, if anyone here might have any advice.
I don't have any suggestions for specifically dyslexia, but I will say that when it comes to learning Verse, like especially if you come from a programming background, it can be very different than what you've experienced before. So my recommendation would be to utilize the great materials that our teams put together online to walk through these tutorials and kind of like get that step-by-step guidance through the language. Can often make it much easier to kind of wrap your head around what's going on in the language versus just getting a big dump of files and trying to sort through them on your own.
Great call. And if you do have any suggestions, Skylar, for how it would be easier to learn, I know you've given feedback before when we asked for the creator. We had a question of the month about accessibility. But if you ever have any specifics on feedback that would be helpful, please continue to send them our way. Let's see. Oh, is there an external facing API on the roadmap for statistic or tournament applications?
We don't have one on the roadmap coming from Epic. I guess I want to answer this one in conjunction with another one that we have here in the feed from Grim T-Rex.
Yeah.
It says, can you add verse code in an Olympics type game?
Mm-hmm.
The one of the great things with verse persistence as we build it out today is that it allows you to really construct the data that you want to persist to be exactly what you want to persist and to make it behave how you need it to behave for your experience, which means anything from a dungeon crawler to a tournament style game to a tycoon. Like, you can build out your data to be exactly what you want to track the data that you need to track. Whereas historically, using like the save point device and stuff like that, they were built for very specific applications and very specific use cases, and it would kind of constrain what you could and couldn't do. Where now, as long as you can define the data in a class or whatever in verse, you can track whatever data you want. So I could see maybe we might have some in the future. This is not a guarantee, but I could see us maybe having tutorials about a stat system or something like that. And I think we actually do have some of those up as part of the tutorials we put together for verse persistence. And so if you're looking for a jumping off point, that might be a great place to start. But we're excited to see what the community comes up with and how they use this to make new and interesting and novel experiences for everybody.
Oh, so coming back to that graph algorithm one, so there's all the array stuff that you'll see in the digest. Lately was added a sort by as well, which is a stable sort, though we're not really exactly specifying what sorting algorithms used. It's the one that all of UE is using, so you should be able to expect good things out of it.
Very great. Oh, God, we got a lot of great questions rolling in. Keep them coming. Will verse persistence always require replacing the entire persistent class? Will there ever be support for updating individual fields without needing to construct the entire class?
Yeah, so I can answer that one. So I'm assuming the way you'd want to do it would be with like a var field, like a field that you can mutate. Um, with the model of persistence we have now, the short answer is no. The longer and maybe better answer or more optimistic answer is that we're looking into making it so that generally you'll be able to do, everything for some definition of everything. But it ends up being very hard, very fast to make sure everything's in sync as you mutate arbitrary, pointers basically. So we're actively working on it, but it's a ways out.
Thanks, Andy. How do you test the uploaded maps before publishing? Because sometimes my map, the settings change after uploading.
Yeah. So there are a bunch of different ways that you can test. Right now, we're using a private island code. Earlier today, when Evan and I were testing, we were just using live edit. And then, of course, the final test is once it's a public matchmaking code. I highly recommend that you first test in live edit, make sure it's working as planned. If you're trying to test with a team or test with a group of people, making sure that they're part of your team when you're in live edit, and then you can invite them to your party. And then if you have a private island code, again, making sure that either the people who you're playing with are part of your team or a part of your playtesting group. You can set up both teams and playtesting groups in Creator Portal. So those are the two best ways to test before the island is fully live. So definitely recommend checking out all of the documentation on that.
I want to add to that some stuff around testing persistence specifically. If we can cut to Evan's screen, he has it pulled up here, which is inside the island settings for your island. If you search for persistence, there are a couple settings in there, persistence behavior edit session and persistence behavior playtest session. What these allow you to do is to test the persistent nature of your island, both either in edit mode when you're running from UEFN or in a private playtest. What these will do is if you have a live version of your island that has data saved to it, they will allow you to either import live data from your live version of your records for that persistent data, or you can say simulate new user, which will treat it as though it's a brand new user coming to your island for the first time. What this allows you to do is that as you're developing your island, evolving your island over time, very often you're going to add new fields to your persistent data or things like that. This will allow you to test the behavior of that new code against both new users and what existing users will experience when they join your island, so that you can make sure you're not, clearing everybody's data or things like that. But this does, I want to point out, this does require that your island has been published live and that you've played on your island and have persistent data for the island in order to use the what is it? Import from live, I think, is the other setting. Like simulate new users, simulate new users, what's showing here. The other setting is import live data. So that will only work to import live data if you have live data. But this should allow you to both either in UAFN edit sessions or in private playtests test persistent behavior for your island as well.
That's a great call out.
Absolutely. Let's see. Okay, and then sorry, I was handling something on the side. Persistence, from my understanding, can only be tested in private code. Any possibilities of being able to do that in launch game? Oop. Something got added, it all got pushed. Being able to do that in the launch session game editor in the roadmap. That's what we were just talking about that, right? We were talking about that. Okay.
Yep, we just got that one.
Cool. Persistent player statistics docs example uses a setup with player underscore stat classes instead of just INTS for the persistable map. Is that any better than just having INT members in the map class or type?
I can take first.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No. Andy first.
They all jumped at once.
uh,
That's a good one.
Yeah, so as far as having like a weak map that's a player mapping to an int, there's a very large difference between that and a weak map mapping a player to a class that has one field that's an int. And the major difference is backwards compatibility behavior. If it's just an int, it will always be an int now and forever, and you'll never be able to change it. If it's a class, you can add fields to it. You can't remove fields, but you can always add more fields and just ignore the earlier ones. So if you're talking about that change, it's huge. If you're talking about just being nested further under further classes, it's kind of the same idea, but maybe not as important, since as long as you're at least have one level that's a class, you can always add more fields to that one.
Yeah, I want to call out from Evan's example along those lines. He did mention we have a limit of 2 week maps per island right now. And when you have at least one of those being a class, as Andy said, you can continue to add more stuff to the class. So the behavior that they have in the island right now could just as easily be done with a single class that has more fields underneath it versus having 2 week maps for storing different types of data. And so, yeah, having it just so it maps to an int like does kind of paint you into a corner. Same actually holds true to some extent for having a player to a struct in your weak map, because structs, once they're published publicly, are static. You can't change them. You can't add new fields. You can't alter them, the structure of them, right? The definition of the struct. And so we definitely recommend using classes when possible, because then it allows you to evolve your persistent data over time.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you. Is it possible to have each player's stats be displayed on one line for your entire lobby, like names, wins, or losses, without the name length affecting other stats positioning on the billboard?
So with the way that we built it, no. Could you continue to do some UI magic? I think so. But you're definitely going to have to tweak what's in the template.
I mean, I will also say you can make a custom message for your billboard, which is what we're doing in the template, where you don't split up by lines. You could just have everything on one line, but the length of your billboard will also have to change. So,
Right. Well, and
UI
then,
magic.
yeah. I mean, and you can also use other UI tools, not just billboards. So
Yeah, to call it there, like the font that's used most of the time is not a fixed width font. So if you're trying to get clean line of like stats all in a column and names all in a column, that's going to be difficult to do by putting them all in one line. But as they mentioned, you can pass these into custom formatted strings and do all sorts of formatting as you desire. But some of those like really crisp, like justification things and stuff are going to be a challenge.
Cool. We've got a few more questions, and then we can move into the next segment, and then we can take some more questions later if that works too. Let's see here. I'm liking this deep dive into verse programming. Are you making this a series, and how often are you streaming? If that is the case, ooh, Look. I'm just saying I may have begged Evan at one point to do these more. I'm not putting him on blast here, but I'm also no, but and he's down. He's down. But yeah, it's really just a matter of having, we're working on a lot of stuff. Do people have the time? Some parts of the year are way more busy than others for game dev, as you all probably know. And certain projects are more heavy lift. So it's really just kind of scheduling around that. But we are aware that you all are requesting more verse deep dives. I know we've talked about having a verse UI deep dive. We're still trying to make that happen. We're kind of waiting for some more stuff to come out so we can make it really, really impactful. But if you do have specific topics that you'd love to see a deep dive on when it comes to verse, please reach out to me, Stacy, anyone here, Heather here, and let us know. Like, hey, would really, really love some deep dives like this on this specific thing. The more people that are wanting the same thing, the more of a hey, this is going to help more people, and we love to reach as many people as possible and help with that. But just knowing the kind of stuff you're looking for is so helpful as well. So thank you for that. Let's see, a couple more questions. Can you explain how to wipe or overwrite data and use the version that is shown in the stats table class? I saw Andy had
Yeah.
a little bit of an answer for us there.
Yeah, so I'm assuming this is like a version field. I think we recommended in the docs that you would have a version field and you would increment it as you publish changes and add fields. So to wipe data when you move to a later version, you don't really wipe data. It's more that you ignore data. Like you'll increment the version field, add the additional fields that you want, and anything that loads in at the old version, you'll somehow transition using the old fields to the new fields. And then at that point, just ignore the old fields.
I guess maybe in a continued answer on that too is when it comes down to just wiping data, when the player is in the session, if you write a default version of the data to their entry in the week map, it will overwrite their data.
Mm.
So the version stuff Andy's talking about is if you were to detect that the data loaded at version 2 and you're going to version 3, you could make whatever changes you want as part of that operation. That could include just wiping their data entirely. Now, cautionary tale, and this is why we promote using the version, is that you can't tell when a player has joined your session and when their data was saved as part of the persistence originally, which could have been an hour ago, a month ago, 10 weeks ago. So like having that version lets you track what their data is migrating from when it's loaded. So you can provide the right sort of migration operations on the data once it's present in the session.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Question. Will verse code items be in UEFN only, or will items be added to creative for people that don't know verse? Where the item, I assume the device would do the verse for you. That's a good question that I've been wondering. I don't know how much we are able to speak on that because that is such a broad question here, but
I'd say for now, verse items running verse in creative is not on our roadmap. The plan is, or the suggestion is the hope is that as you enter the creative ecosystem, and very likely starting in creative mode, that if you increase in your sophistication of your content you're creating as a creator, that you can easily migrate your content into UEFN to gain those added capabilities and tools that aren't available in creative mode today.
awesome. Let's see. We're getting a lot of great questions. Are you planning to add the ability to change material parameter collections via verse?
I can take that one. Yes, we are. This is an area we're actively working, is exposing access via verse to a variety of different asset types. So I'd say watch for news on that front. I don't have any official, we don't have any official release dates on those, but that's stuff that we're actively working on as a team.
Keep those eyeballs open. I saw someone also said they were in here. Oh, Peepo. Hi, Peepo Mees. Even though I can't use UFN, I love listening to these. Well, welcome, Peepo Mees. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, let's see here. Any plans to extend the max possible player key week_maps? Currently, it's only supported 2.
Yeah, so the reason it's so limited currently is well, largely we can always increase it later. We can never decrease it, because if we decrease it, we'll break your code. And that's kind of like an absolute that we are trying our hardest to not do. So we can always increase it. And basically, depending on usage patterns, if everything looks okay, we likely will increase it.
Ooh, love to hear that. Love to hear that. What's persistence relationship with verse paths? If a project were to implement reference another project's verse path, does the new project get its own persistent data?
This is something that we're looking at, is maybe the best way to put it.
Cool. Yes, keep sharing the things that you would love to have or that would be helpful, and we'll continue looking into that stuff. Let's see. Are there plans for Verse to open up more tweakable features to player and vehicle devices? For example, setting player run speed, jump height, vehicles turn speed, or drive speed and stuff. It's a little adjacent. I don't know if we have insight into that here.
No concrete plans to increase access for specific features like that. I'd say continue to make requests in our forums. We do use our forums to gauge sentiment from the community and understand what it is that you as a community want us to add. So if you have requests like that, please continue to make those requests in the forums, and that will help it get on our list of stuff to do.
Awesome.
Yeah, go over to the feature requests section and then add in as much detail as you want, right? Like, which settings do you want to have Verse API access to directly? That way we can give that feedback more thoroughly. If you just say, like, I want more, we're not sure which ones you're asking for. So please be specific.
Please be specific. That's right. That's the mantra. And Professional Cog, if you could drop a link in chat for our EDC forums, that would be amazing. So we can make sure that we point people to the right place. All right. With that,
I will also
go
shout
ahead.
out. I will also shout out like the surveys we put out on socials and Discord. Participation in those is a really, really good way to get your voice heard, is what I'm going to say.
Evan might have a personal stake. He might have a personal stake in it. And he might be the ones helping put those together. Thank you, Evan. We appreciate it. And Sarah and everybody. But yes, please do. We love getting your info. And honestly, this is one of the only places I've ever worked where we've asked for so much feedback. And I really think that's wonderful. And for those of you who do give us your feedback, thank you for your time, because we know it's important. And thank you for participating and understanding how important those are, because they help us drive the whole product and help us, make it better for you. So we appreciate you. Okay, we're going to move forward because we answered a ton of questions, and I guess we're going to throw it into the playtest. Is it playtest time, Heather?
Well, we
Is that
kind
what
of
we're
did a
talking about?
play
We
test.
kind of did a play test.
Oh, yes, you did. Did we get to see it much though? Did we get?
That's true. That's true.
We did cut away a lot.
We can do a real play test.
I want people to get hyped and vote on who's going to win. And I know it's going to be Heather. Sorry, Evan, but
Not gonna be me.
Evan's eyebrows. He was
Evan,
like,
do you want to go back to lobby so you can pick me up?
Yeah, I got you. And we can also use this as like a broad section to just talk about like
yeah, let's do it.
the
Well,
design
after the
behind different
playtest,
things.
we'll talk about the design, and as we're
Yes.
racing around, we can talk about some of our favorite features.
Yes, let's do that. We'll make it a little engaging section. And if you guys have any questions about the design, I think I saw a shout out for how beautiful it looked earlier when you showed it. So thank you for that, whoever shouted that out. But yeah, if you have any questions about design, a little bit more about Verse, about this in particular, please shoot them in our chat with question and brackets so we can pull them. And yeah, we'll get to showing this off. We got some really cute emojis in the Unreal chat. Thanks, y'all. Guys got some unique emojis that I haven't seen before. I appreciate you. Oh, here's one question that's popped up. Does Verse contain a graphics library? It would be useful for operating and traversing meshes and mesh operations, such as prefactoring for physics. Ooh, graphics library. Are we looking? I guess we're looking at we hear you. Great feedback.
I'd say not at this time.
Yeah. But definitely share that if it's something that you want. Put it in our forums. Put it in our thank you, Crimson. Put it in our forums link there that Crimson Wonder has shared. And I will drop it in this chat too.
All
Okay.
right, guys, I'm ready to lose.
Nah. Not
You
with that
haven't seen.
attitude.
What's
You
your best lap
haven't
time, Heather?
seen how good Evan is.
She's
What's your
gonna
Not.
best lap time, bro?
smoking.
I don't know. I think it's like a minute 37. Like,
We should
not
take
that
bets now.
good.
Who's Team Heather? Who's Team Evan? Let's go. Come on, chat.
Okay, so fun story about the initial creation of this map. We tried literally every vehicle.
Ooh.
We really struggled with getting the speed right and with making sure that
Oh god.
the little hacks
Oh,
like
I
Evan just
threw!
took.
I threw, man.
Oh no, I didn't go through the thing. Oh, this is so
It's okay,
frustrating.
we're both throwing. We're both throwing.
So yeah, so we tried everything and we decided that we liked the trucks the best because they have the ability to add the cow catcher. And that was fun for being able to be a little bit
Oh.
aggressive against each
Yeah.
other.
We also wanted to pick a vehicle that was like intentionally kind of hard to drive. So the trucks with the off-road tires with nitro, like
Yeah.
you just get flung everywhere.
The physics is definitely a little crazy, and that is intended.
I thought it was just me. Also, people are only voting for Heather. So, Heather, no pressure.
No
no
pressure. I'm
pressure.
like way behind.
Oh.
It's
Well, I'm going to
fine.
switch teams now because now I feel like Evan's underrepresented. Go, Evan, go.
Thank you, thank you.
Poor Evan.
I'm trying
I
to
believe
think
in you, Evan.
what else did we well, there's some cool stuff that we added around speed boosts, which Evan, I don't know if you've triggered one of those.
Yeah, so when you pick up the silver coins, you get a temporary speed boost.
Ooh, we love that.
We also intentionally did give unlimited nitro because we want players to be flinging around the track.
I was going to say. I love it.
You would not believe how many like stuck or out of bounds spots we discovered by just flying into them at like Mach 5.
I was about to
Yes.
ask the QA process there, how fun that was.
I think I mean, most of the QA bugs that we got were either verse persistence things, which we fixed, or related to going out of bounds and just needing to fix physics so that you could get your car back on the track. That's why throughout the track there are so many spots that are kind of open. It's not that we're expecting people to take that as a shortcut, it's that we wanted people to get back onto the track. Oh, Evan, I just ran over a cow catcher. We're still
That's
having that
crazy.
visual bug.
Yeah, for anyone who likes how the track looks, massive shout out to Heavy Iron Studios
Ooh.
for contributing their art to this track. I am not an artist, so this is
I don't know.
them.
I see those Gundams.
Thanks.
So let's, Evan, if you want to go to the editor now,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and
yeah.
just kind of talk through some of the stuff that we changed here.
Yeah.
I'm also before that actually,
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout out the doc super fast. We have a doc that goes into like all of our design decisions, a lot of the verse code decisions. It's this Speedway Race with First Persistence doc. It also goes into the level design, so we include this picture here, which is like the initial mock-up by Heavy Iron, adding things like elevation to the initially like flat racetrack. Yeah, just again, massive shouts to the art team. That's what I have to say.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into that a little bit more. So the first area that you come into in this map, this is actually really important for this being a tutorial island. We wanted to make sure that you had all of the mechanics and billboards that help you understand all the mechanics right here. Now, if you were someone who created our original Speedway map, you'll know that it was really dark and this weird dingy garage, and it wasn't super clean or crisp. And so we did a lot of work to come in here and give this space some visual flair so that when you first come in, especially because we wanted the lobby leaderboard here, that it was visually interesting, but so that you also didn't lose any of that important mechanical conversation. So, Evan, if you want to kind of pan around a little bit, we can kind of go through each of the sections of the tutorial zone. So obviously this is the initial spawn points. So this is where everyone will spawn in, whether you're in the game mode or when you're first launching live edit and just editing session. All right, spin back around. Sweet. So up at the top left, we have our timers. These are the various timers that are used throughout the map to trigger the cinematic ending or to trigger the like being in the leaderboard space ending, as well as I think this is also the timer to end the game. So they're all layered up at that top left. Then we've got our lobby, which Evan already walked us through, that tells us all about who's in first, second, third, and so on for this local leaderboard. All right, pan around.
So many devices.
Yeah, okay. So over here we have a whole slew of analytics devices. This was really important to me, actually. I did a lot of work here to figure out which kinds of analytics do we want to track for this map, and is there anything that we could potentially learn from the map and from our playtests that we could use to make things easier. So we track all sorts of things from uh, how often people are finishing each checkpoint, to finishing the map, to finishing the rounds, really anything that we could do to try and find specific opportunities to optimize the gameplay experience. Then we have our team names and colors. These are really mostly just used to do the initial assigning of player to vehicle. So not super useful, but important. Okay, then we've got our visual devices. So we have our HUD controller to turn off a bunch of the things that aren't relevant, right? We're not building, we don't need resources. So we wanted to turn off all those HUD elements. So we've got that device here to do that. And then we've also got our visual effects devices to explode and show you fireworks and things when the race is complete. This also is a nice visual indicator for somebody who is playing the map and is not in first place to know that they need to finish the map. XP is important. So we added some accolades devices here to grant XP when a lap is finished and when a race completes. We definitely thought about doing more dynamic XP here, but for the sake of this small experience and the focus on verse, we kept it simple, just giving you a large grant of XP when you finish a lap, and then an extra large grant when you finish the race. Okay. So now is the opening cinematics. And there's a lot of devices here, including some verse that's not pulled into this area. It's over to the left. But this is where we have our HUD devices that have that big, bold text that say ready, set, go. We also have the cinematic device here that we use to trigger the full cinematic that Josh and Sarah worked so hard on. We've got those triggers that Evan talked about earlier that are required for all of the logic. And then we also have our player spawner here, just because that is an important part of the cinematic devices. So we wanted to make sure that you knew when you were coming into the template, like if you wanted to reuse this, you would need all of the devices in this spot. Sweet. Then we have our core gameplay loop, and we went through most of this in the verse persistence section because it's mostly verse. But we've got our verse devices here that do the starting game sequence to trigger the cinematic, and also the end game verse devices here as well. Perfect. And then finally, you still kept our initial player spawn cars and our race mechanics from the original map. We actually just brought them right over and didn't change anything about them because they're really useful in spawning in the player, putting the player into the car, and then also just using the race manager was an easy way to make sure that we had a race to actually play without having to do extra logic. So we use the checkpoints, the race manage device, and that's it. So those are like the devices and the logic behind the map. Evan, is there anything in here that you wanted to emphasize specifically?
I don't know. We've just made a cool lobby.
We did. It's so pretty. Josh came in after I put all of the billboards in, and he added in the skylights above, and it just absolutely changed the whole vibe. So
I'll say I did want like 100-foot tall player reference devices so that you could always see like who was in first during a race right in the middle of the map. The problem is they do have a maximum size, and they also don't have the largest draw distance. So you'd be like halfway around the racetrack, and then they would disappear and then pop in.
It was pretty distracting.
But if any of you guys make like a smaller map, please put in gigantic statues of your players.
All
It's
right, so
really
now
cool.
let's go over and talk about the like actual level design. If you want to pan over to the racetrack itself. So in the original map, we had a figure 8 map with huge stadiums surrounding it and then a city in the background. We knew that for this map, we wanted it to still be a race. We wanted to have some element of stadium. We didn't want to lose our city in the background, but goodness, did we not like our figure 8. We wanted to refresh it and take advantage of all of the tools that come with UAFN, namely landscape mode. We were so excited to draw out a map in landscape mode, kind of have fun with it, figure out some of that elevation, and then throw it over to our art team to give us even more insight into how we could make this so much more visually interesting and exciting for players so that you're not just driving around the same look and feel of a map the entire time. It really feels like you're in the middle of a forest on this speedway racetrack. But we didn't want to lose that element of still kind of being in the city, so we still kept the original city buildings from before. We just moved them off to the background, off to the left here, so that you still feel like, oh, we're kind of still in that same spot. We're still in that city, but now we're in the off-road version of the map.
There's a really great question in chat, Heather, that I want you to address, which is, was the project actually converted from 1.0 or was it started over, and any issues the team had to overcome?
Oh my gosh, so many. So we really did. I went into creative and then I hit convert into UAFN and then I loaded up UAFN and I said, oh my God, what did we do? We had so many devices like barriers that we were using because that was like the easiest way to keep a player in the map back in the creative days. We had everything came in and auto-populated and auto-named itself. So the details in the outliner panel was an absolute disaster. It was just everything in the world. And so I spent probably 3 hours before I let anyone else touch the project, sorting things into folders and then deleting things that I knew we didn't want anymore. So we really quickly decided all of the assets that were around the racetrack itself and the big stadium, we wanted that gone. So I put that all into a folder and then I deleted it. And then we sorted out all of the other devices and figured out, hey, do we still want barriers? Do we still want the starting zone? And so we were able to keep the starting zone, all of our initial car placements, those initial buildings, and then all of the checkpoints we actually kept, and then we just added a few more once we decided what the real layout of the map was going to be. But it took a lot of work to get it to a place where we felt happy with the folder structure and just the naming structure of everything. You know, when you migrate something from creative, you're just inheriting a bunch of tech debt around naming, around positioning. And so, like, if we look over here right now, like in the outliner, Evan has these start position 3 folder, start position 4 folder. We had to create each of those manually and rename each device manually to make sure that it was the right number and that we were definitely always checking which spawn happened when. And so like you'll also see here, there's still some tech debt that we didn't get rid of. We had a winner's tower in the original map, and so that we thought we were maybe going to keep it, so we kept the folder. Of course, as Evan said, we ended up not being able to keep that first, second, and third place podiums, so we don't have the winner's tower anymore. But that's just a little bit of how we did the migration.
Awesome. Well, we have a handful more questions if we'd like to jump to
Let's
those
do it.
briefly. Was this project actually converted from creative or was it started over again? Any issues that the team had to overcome?
Yeah, we just answered that, so 100%
Oh,
came from
I didn't realize you
creative.
guys were pulling from it. Okay.
Yeah.
I
We
heard
got that
Evan and
one.
I was
Evan
like,
got
what a
it.
great question. Okay. What does did you ask the next one, or is that
No,
okay?
that was it. That was the
Okay,
last one.
sorry. I'm tackling things on the side. What decisions did you make for the template that you think you would have made differently if it was your own creation? If it was your own island, personally. Interesting.
Um, oh man. So for me, like this was such a collaborative labor of love that I just really enjoyed getting to riff off of other people's ideas. So I remember when we first started doing it and Josh was like, "Oh, I really want speed boosts." And I was like, "Every map does speed boosts. How are we going to do that in a unique, fun way?" And he was like, "Oh, well, I was thinking that we would have a trail of coins that lead up to a final coin, and that final coin would be the speed boost." And that's different. That's unique and fun, and I really loved that it was this cool way to have like a normal mechanic in a racing map, but do it in a way that still felt new and fun. So I personally, I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'll want to change as we keep releasing new features, but I'm really happy with where we landed. Evan, what about you?
I'm also pretty happy with where we landed coming out from the programming aspect. Like when you're working on a developing product, you're always going to see new features on the horizon and want to pull them in. Um, and that's always a challenge. So, new things have released since then that I'd be like, oh man, I want to put that in. That'd be so great. Um, but also, yeah, I'm really happy with where we landed. Really, it's just you have to stop yourself from like overdeveloping the code and working on it endlessly. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah, I think the
Oh,
only other thing as we were developing is just trying to keep our scope reasonable. Like we this was not a full-time job for any of us. This was something we were all doing on the side to make sure that you all had access to a really cool template that would show you how to use a leaderboard. So there are definitely design decisions that we made that we would change if we weren't focused on just making this about verse. But yeah, it's good fun.
yeah, that's a great question. How do you add unique animations to characters while they are in or on a vehicle? Is that doable yet?
No.
Great question. I've been wanting it ever since I saw the Rocket Racing trailer where characters were on top of vehicles, and I was like, "Is that how it's gonna be?" And then it wasn't.
It's not how it is. I mean,
But now
obviously,
I
like
want
when a player is on a vehicle, if they decide to get out and get onto a vehicle, they can emote and do that. But we don't
That's
really
true.
have any capabilities right now to add custom character animations to a player character.
But if you want it, ask for it. Put it in the forums. Bring awareness. We wanna, we wanna tackle the things that we think will be most impactful that people want. Is there a better way to communicate to devs regarding verse or bug feature requests other than the forums? The automated responses feel like voices are unheard. Great call out. Just so you know, when the reason for those automated responses is because it puts it directly into our system. At previous places I've been, bug reports do go unheard. Bug reports don't get logged. Bug reports do get lost. If you post it on Discord, we can see it, but it's not going to go automatically into our system. The reason why we do push for the forums is because it is automatically putting it directly into our hands on the back end, being tracked, being viewed, being checked on, being processed. It's as far as communities concerned, it's Stacy and myself, Flack and myself on there. Um, can we respond to each bugger post and say, hey, this has been logged in addition to what the computer's saying? We could, but just know that it is an automated system to make it easier. So we have more time to be able to help you in a lot of other various ways. So please don't. I understand how that feels like it's separate, but do understand that it's actually way better than most processes that I've seen, and it is directly going in. So once it's in there, people start looking at it, they get their hands on it, they start QA testing it, start to figure out. If they don't have enough information, we'll come back and ask for more. So do keep an eye out for that. But that is why we push to the forums. Now, as far as feedback is concerned, please also continue doing that. We are logging that similarly. That is all getting uploaded straight into the system. And then quite a few of us even here are involved with that. So definitely keep doing that as well. At the end of the day, it's directly in our system. It's owned by Epic. It is the best way to get it to us. But we understand the feedback and hear the feedback of it feeling like you're unheard. But just know it's like the most heard I've ever seen. So please trust me when I say that. Now that being said, prioritization, we get lots of issues, lots of bugs. There's a lot of people who are trying to focus and create different types of experiences within Fortnite Creative and UEFN. And because of that, we've got to prioritize because we also have limited resources and how to tackle those things. So there are some things that might not get, tackled as fast as others. But just know the more upvotes you can get, the more, people kind of chiming in, the more info we can get from you about what's going on. It'll be much, much easier for us to tackle those. So I want to thank each and every one of you for doing that. You are not unheard. We hear you. I hear you. And we're tackling those as we can. So remember, put them on the forums. I know it feels more detached because forums are kind of, a thing that has been around a really long time. It's not its instant feeling, but this is the best way to go, and we'll be happy to get that to you. And shout out to as well, threw into chat a link for feedback that you can add about this template. So if you have any thoughts, feedback, you run into any issues, drop it in that feedback thread, and the team here will be keeping an eye out on that and checking it to see, what cool feedback you have or what thoughts you have as you've gotten more time to been able to play with it and check it out and get a feel for it. So I'll throw that. Thank you, Crimson.
I
But
will
yeah.
say, Shane, yeah, Dave and I both want to add. So go ahead, Dave.
I just want to reiterate that it is hugely useful to us on the development side as you add, verse code examples, details about what the issues are that you're seeing or specifically what you want. If we get a request that says, hey, make this better, or this is breaking and we don't have any code examples or anything, that makes it really hard for us to understand the scope of the problem and how to fix it. So huge thank you to all those who do post forum posts with a bunch of information. If you see stuff in the forums and it's similar to the issues you're already seeing, upvoting also helps dramatically and bring those things, help us understand the impact on the community. So just wanted to reiterate that and thank the community for the people that do that already. And just if you're going to post stuff on forums, please do try and add whatever information you give us, because that becomes a huge help for us to help resolve those issues.
Yeah. And then on the feedback side, I just want to say, I know Shane already said this, but Shane, Flack, and a couple other people, we read literally every single post. In fact, I just did it this morning for all of August's feedback. I went through every single post and added details from my own experience and really just tried to make sure that your voices are heard. We have a really rigorous process to make sure that we're looking at every single thing that you have to say and giving it the credit that it deserves. So even if you're not hearing back from us, we are working on it. I know that it sometimes feels like, hey, I've posted this 6 times in the last 6 months. Why isn't it getting done? And sometimes it's that it takes more than 6 months to make that feature come to life. So also just be patient with us. We're working as fast as we can to address as much of your feedback as we can. And we just really appreciate all of the detail, as Dave said, in both your bug reports, but also in your feature requests, because that helps us really make sure that the product that we're making is going to help you solve your problems.
Yep. You heard it here, folks. Okay, and then we've got quite a few questions in chat again about how to update persistable class, saving the player name and persistent data too. Do you want to pull up, I guess, the tool
Sure.
and take a look?
Yeah, let's start with the persisting the player name. In order
we want to go back to code. Okay, great.
There we go.
It can be in code. In order to persist something in a class or in a weak map, it has to have the attribute of persistable on the type. Messages are not persistable, and if you extract the name of a player through the API, it will give you a message, which is basically a localized version of a string. So you can't save player names or player handles in persistent weak map, but the key to the weak map is the player, so you can always get the name back out of the player when you have them in your session anyway. So even though you can't persist that in your data, a big part of the reason for that, just to kind of give some insight there, is our attempts to make sure that our players' data stays safe, and that as creators, we don't expose ways for people to harvest people's personal data. So that includes people's player handles, like their Epic IDs and stuff like that. So that's the reasoning behind that. But like I said, the key for the weak map is always the player for this case, so you can always re-get the player's name during the session that they're in. So wanted to kind of talk about, there's a lot of questions around, can you update just a single field inside of a class as part of persistable? I wanted to make sure we highlighted what Evan showed earlier in his example, which is the prescribed methodology for updating a class as part of a persistent weak map, that lets you not just update a single field, but have a more minimal version of updating and creating a new instance of the class. And so if you look at this makes player stats table that he's showing on the screen here, it takes a player stats table, that's the old table, and then you'll see that it just writes the values from the old table into the copy of the new table. The benefit of this is that when you want to actually update the field, you can use this constructor to make a new copy of the class, and then you can overwrite any of those specific fields with a new value that you want. So maybe, Evan, can you pull up where we're updating just one of those values?
Here's wins.
Yeah, so with wins here, for example, there's some ifs there to check to get the data out of the persistent weak map. But then in the set, you're setting a new instance of the persistent stats table. You're using that constructor to construct a new copy from the old copy of the table that we got up in the if block above. But then you're just saying podiums is now the current podiums plus the podiums, right? And that allows you to update just that one field. The rest of the fields will automatically be updated to the value from the original copy of the table that was passed in. And so you don't have to, let's say in the future you added 10 more values into this class. The only place you'd have to update that to map those would be in the constructors. And then from there, you can still just update your code everywhere else. You don't have to update every place you're updating your values in code for every new stat that you add. So that's the prescribed method for now. As was mentioned, and maybe, I don't know if Andy has more context here, this may change in the future, but for now, the hope is that this allows you to do updates in a way that is reasonable and manageable without having to manually copy every single field every single time you want to make an update. So Andy, do you have any more you want to add there?
So the way that's shown here is definitely the way that will work like for now and also in the future. The alternative that I guess someone had asked of earlier about like just having var fields and persisting those, that's far enough away that I think like learning this constructor idiom's the right way to go. The other alternative, and I don't really recommend it because it's not a class, but what this is doing is if you like search for it, it's pretty much like what's called a functional update. So you're not really updating the existing class, you're creating a new one that's updated in only the small slice that you care about. Structs happen to support that like now. Like you can do a set on a struct field, even though the struct field isn't a var. Downside, though, is that you have to use a struct, and structs cannot change. Like you cannot update them to have more fields if they're in a weak map like value. So though it might be syntactically a little bit easier, using a constructor function is definitely the way to go.
Follow up on other verse questions.
Yeah, let's go.
There was one about text size in verse. There are various ways you can display text in UEFN experiences today. One of the most common ones is the billboard device. It does have an exposed API for setting the text size, and so you can manipulate text size there. I guess the thing to know there is that it changes the text size for the entire billboard, so you can't have like one row that's bigger and one row that's smaller text size without having multiple billboard devices, but you can do that with multiple billboard devices. For other areas that we have text exposed, the goal is to eventually have text size controls. In cases where we don't have them, I think that's things that we can reasonably watch for to come in the future. But if you do want to do text size for now, I know for sure that the billboard device does that, and some other devices, it'll be on a device by device basis where those controls will be exposed. And so you can just watch for that in the future.
Oh.
Okay, we had another question come in. What are some of the best use cases for Verse that can't be done with devices? I love the devices, they're so good, but I haven't been able to find a good use for Verse yet. I just thought that would be a fun question, maybe Dave, Andy, and Evan, for you to give some examples of things that you either want to see done or you've seen done that you love.
Oh, I mean, you can do anything in verse, right? I guess with given that there's persistable, I'm a big fan of roguelites. Uh, I would love to see some roguelite of any sort, like Binding of Isaac style or whatever. Like that would be fantastic. That's really what I'd want to be able to see.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on that, like the devices are awesome. They're super easy to use. They're also very constrained to do just the exact thing that they do and nothing more, right? And that's where I think the shift and value to going diverse comes in my mind, is that you can start with behaviors that maybe are simple and then add your own custom behaviors to them. Whether that's that I push a button, like in a device, you can push a button and you can link that event to other devices to trigger things to happen, but you can only trigger things that are triggerable on devices. In Verse, now you can literally do anything you can do in Verse as a response to that button press, right? Or whatever it is. And so that customizability, we see that already in the community today. There are tycoon games, there are escape room games. There's all sorts of different types of games that would be challenging, if not impossible, to build with straight up devices only, or that at least you have to kind of contort the devices to do the thing you want to do. That now with Verse you can do very, very bespoke and custom behaviors. And so I think that's where the biggest value comes in my mind, is the ability to just do something completely new and off the wall and innovative.
Evan?
Yeah, and especially on like the tutorials, docs, examples, templates side, a lot of what we want to do is show you how you can use Verse to elevate your experiences, or like Dave was saying, create experiences that you can't create at all natively using devices. So for instance, say the Verse starter template, which is a template you can create in UEFN, that involves using UI to send commands to move an NPC around a game board, which is not something you can do with devices. And then other things such as the animating prop movement tutorial recently released for Fall Guys. That shows you how to move props back and forth, which you could do with prop movers. But in that tutorial, you can do things like squash, stretch, rotate, translate props all at once, using like harder math. And then things such as sorting using merge sort. That's adding like a common programming feature onto your existing experience. So hopefully through our documentation, we can inspire you to add Verse to your device, or sorry, add Verse to your experiences, and B, make new experiences that you couldn't previously just using creative.
Okay, I've got at least two more here. Are there future plans for Verse to be able to access more of Unreal features like Niagara, similar to the recent material properties update?
Yeah, I can take that one. Want to put a shout out here for, I think this is a couple months ago, we did another one of these live streams for the scene graph work that we're doing as a team. Part of that scene graph work will be to work to do much more to expose many more of these underlying systems that are tech we have in Unreal Engine and stuff to Verse, so that it'll allow you to add far more interesting capabilities to your games than you can add today. So I'd say watch for news there. Not going to like give any specific timelines on that, but soonish. And And that developer deep dive, which hopefully we can add a link to here in the chat, will give you some good insight into kind of the direction that we're taking there with the scene graph work that we're doing, and kind of how that will allow you to leverage some of these capabilities.
Right, and you can currently mess around with Scene Graph in experimental right now, but you cannot publish yet. So stay tuned for when that will be available. But in the meantime, please go mess around with it, give us feedback on Scene Graph, and check out the current direction. Okay, one more question here, which we may have just answered, but I want to make sure I call it out. Are there any plans to allow collision detection and raycasting through Verse? I know there's a hacky method with Control Rig currently, but wondering if there's a better way.
I'd say see the answer to last question. This is also stuff that we're addressing and looking into as part of the scene graph work that we're doing today.
Sweet.
I do see one other one that sounds fun. I don't know if we have a clear answer yet, but can you use verse code to be able to randomize game modes, ensuring they change every time you enter?
Let me make sure before I answer that.
Thanks, Andy.
Love it. Oh, and thank you, Crimson Wonder, for that link to the Inside UAFN Scene Graph GDC talk. Definitely check that out, but also check out the deep dive that we did on stream.
I mean, I think the short answer that Andy's checking on right now is that yes, since it's verse code, and we do have things like shuffle functions and things like that, that you could use those to randomize like which room you went into or which mini game you triggered or whatever. You could, in the verse code, you could do that. There would be some work to correctly like set up your island and stuff from that verse code, driving all that. But in general, I'd say you can do random things in verse today.
I saw one
Okay.
example a while ago of a creator like spawning random room layouts, or rather full rooms actually, for sort of dungeon crawl thing. So it's definitely possible.
So cool.
There's another one here that I think we should answer. Any plans to allow persistent data to carry over between different maps?
There was an earlier question too, asking about verse paths, and I think it kind of related to between maps. And it's kind of the same answer that we are looking into it. So
We hear that feedback a lot. It's something I've asked for regularly. So keep asking for it, keep putting it in the forums. We'll see what we can do.
Hard to say. We really want that feature here too. So, so we hear you that you want that feature in the community.
We do. All right. Well, thank you so much for participating, everyone. Thank you for everyone, the great questions that you had. This was a really, really dense stream with a lot of great information. So thank you for coming in and bringing your questions for us. Thank you, team, for coming today and helping answer all these questions from the community and spending your time putting this together. Really, really appreciate it. I know people have been asking for this for a long time. So thank you for your time, and hopefully it was fun for you all too, and hopefully everyone in chat had a great time attending and learning some more about verse persistence. Great. Well, thank you so much, y'all, and we'll see you again soon on stream. Thank you, audience, for coming. Thanks to Unreal Engine and Fortnite Create community. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Yeah, watch it back. There's a VOD. Bye.